Hey guys, welcome to the show. Keith Reza with the one and only
Alan Lee here.
Alan Lee, and we're brought to you back up by Zoom. We have a great show for you tonight. We're doing it on the Zoom. Alan's at his home. I'm in my home watching Boomer eat my furniture, which is always nice. But a couple shows, October 30th at the Rec Room with Jeremy Hotz, and then the Brea Improv November 23rd to the 26th with Jay Moore. Get your tickets and all that jazz. And we got a great guest. You've seen him on Comedy Central, Crashing. And Louie, the great Greg Fitzsimmons, is going to be here via Zoom. I'm excited. You excited, Alan Lee?
I'm very excited. And we've seen him also on his own podcast, it's great to have him. Greg Fitzsimmons.
Fitz Dog Radio, right?
Yeah.
So,
he was
all right, guys.
Adam Carolla and our friend there in Austin, Joe
Rogan. All right.
Rogan.
All right. Well, we'll be back with the great Greg Fitzsimmons.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.
I see his photo. Hey, Greg. His audio's off. Oh, we got the Greg Fitzsimmons here. He's right there.
Hello.
Hey, Greg.
Hello.
What's happening?
Hey, man. I was having a heart attack. I'm glad you're okay.
Sorry for the delay. No, I was playing golf, and we had a bunch of YouTubers on the hole ahead of us, and they were filming a girl in a micro mini golf skirt as she would tee up her ball, and somehow that held them up. So it was a 3-hour and 15-minute round of 9 holes of golf.
Oh my God. Did you guys win at least, or did you? I don't know anything about golf. Did you win?
Well, there's worse things that can hold you up for 9 holes than a girl in a micro mini skirt teeing up her golf ball. So we won.
Great. Good to hear.
Greg, thank you so much for doing it. I'm a huge fan of your stand-up and your podcast, and thank you so much. It really means a lot to us.
Happy to do it, man. Glad it worked out.
Yeah. So I saw you a couple weeks ago at Supernova Comedy, and you killed it. And
that's good.
Yeah, it was, and that was the show I was on. I think you missed my set, but Josh Blue was there, and Anthony Jeselnik, and you. So,
nice lineup. Wow.
Yeah, it was a great lineup. I was the worst one on that whole lineup.
Well, big fish, small fish in a big pond. You're always better off, right? You learn more.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, obviously you do that venue a lot, but that was my first time ever performing in a circle. Like, how, in all your years of comedy, how long have you ever done that before, or just in that venue?
No, I've done it before. I've always enjoyed it. I kind of the times I've done it have been in bigger theaters where where it's a little more overwhelming. It's one of the first times I did it. I was doing comedy for maybe 5 or 6 years, and then I opened up for a band called Grand Funk Railroad. You ever heard of them?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're an American band. We're coming to your town. We'll help you party down. We're an American band.
You sing it just like them.
And so they're going to be in a round, but they tell me first you go up there and do a half hour, and I don't even have a half hour. They're like, you go up there and do a half hour, and there's no backstage because it's theater in the round. So you got to run down the aisle to get to the stage. And they go, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for Grand Funk Railroad? Place goes bananas. They're already lighting up their lighters. They haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
And they go, but first, give a hand for your opening act. Suddenly confusion comes around the arena. What? Opening what? Boo! They haven't said my name yet. Boo! Book him! Greg Fitzsimmons. I run down. Hey, thank you. Booze, thank you. And now I'm standing on the stage. And the stage, it was a place called it was a theater in the Round in Long Island. I forget what it was called. The something Shore, North Shore Performance Center or something. And so I get on stage, and the stage rotates once every 3 minutes. You've made a full revolution.
Oh, so the stage was actually moving, not you.
Stage was moving.
Holy Lord.
So I walk up and I go, and I try to settle them down, and I'm shitting on them. I'm like, look, you guys have been waiting for this show for 20 years. You can wait another 30 minutes, I know a lot of you are still living at home and you got your parents' station wagon tonight. You got to get home, but just chill out. And so I started to win them over, but there was still some hecklers left. And so somebody would yell some shit at me. But and it was dark out there, and I would try to yell back at them, but the stage was moving. So I didn't know how I was yelling at. I was always off by a couple degrees. I was always yelling at somebody down their row a little ways. And so it was like being a pinata for 30 minutes. And it was brutal. It was brutal.
Did they at least move for the band?
Did the stage move for the band? Yeah, it moved. It moved the whole time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then that I was gonna say, if it didn't move for the band, but just for you, maybe the sound people were just screwing with it.
Yeah.
So Greg, you and I, we have 3 things in common. 1, we're stand-up comedians. 2, we're podcasters, and 3, we used to open up for Norm. So I wanted to hear some of your experiences with that, because I have 7 years of 100 great stories, but headache stories too.
You opened for Norm for 7 years?
Yeah.
How many times did you open for him?
Oh my God, it was over 1,000, I think.
No.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's amazing.
Yeah. How many times did you open for him?
Just that 1 week.
Really?
Yeah, I was in Boston, and I knew him. I knew him for many years, but I only opened for him when I was pretty new. It was probably not too far from when I opened for Grand Funk Railroad, right around that era. And so I just remember opening for him and thinking like it was the biggest thing that ever happened to me. I was a Boston comedian, and he came up, and he'd been doing SNL for maybe a couple of years at that point, 1 or 2 years. And he just, as you know, like, is the most dressed down, no ego guy of all time. He just treated me just like a friend right out of the gate. It was beautiful.
And then I heard that he gave you the wrong number for Weekend Update.
Right.
And so because I saw your tweet when he passed, and I thought that was funny, but then I was like, that's such a thing Norm would do. And I don't think he did it on purpose. I think he just did it. You know what I mean?
Well, it was actually Lori Joe that did it.
Lojo?
Yeah, Lojo gave me the number, and she accidentally gave us the wrong number. So yeah, just in case people don't know the story, basically he liked my stand-up, and he said, why don't you write for me on Weekend Update? Not like a writing job, but like what they call a faxing job, which meant you got paid nothing. And if you got a joke on, you got I think it was like $50 or something.
Yeah. And
so so I came home to New York, and I said to Mike Gibbons, who's been my best friend since college, I was like, let's do this. Let's write for Norm. And so every week we get together, and we would get Chinese food on Thursday nights, because you had to hand the jokes in on Friday morning. And so we get together on Thursday nights, and we get Chinese food, and we'd walk up 6 flights of stairs. I live on 6th floor walk up in Little Italy on Mulberry Street. And we'd sit there, and we'd have a bag filled with newspapers, magazines, everything from that. It was before the internet, Right. We had to find our own stories. And we'd go through it, and we'd pick some stories. And then we would, who's that guy down there, by the way?
Who, Alan Lee?
Hey, Alan Lee.
Oh,
Hey,
he's the sidekick co-host.
yeah, I know. I've been looking forward to this.
Hey, all right.
He just laughs when I bomb and I point to him.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good sidekick. What do you have on the wall? Are those cassette tapes on the wall?
You
Oh,
know,
that's you, Alan.
Can you imagine? I do have cassette tapes.
I love cassette tapes. I still have them.
Yeah, there's something, there's and there are titles that are still not out on these cassettes.
Tell Greg
Sorry?
your top 3 cassette tapes you got.
Well, let me see. I would have to say that I have an old 60s group, right along the same lines as a poster back there. Oh God, it's
He doesn't even turn around to show you.
I'm having a brain fart. Oh, that would help. It was Fresh Garbage was one of their hits. Fresh Garbage. Dun, dun, dun. And I have that somewhere. And God, what a mess.
All right, let's go back to Greg's story.
The denim jacket goes perfectly with the cassette tapes. It really works together.
Thank you, sir.
So we would sit there and we would write all night. We would write for 6 hours. We would just come up with ideas and punch them up and polish them, and then we'd write them all down, and then we would at like 3 a.m. when we felt like there's nothing more we could do, we'd walk over to the fax machine, and it was like we were at the altar. We were feeding these jokes so carefully into this fax machine, hitting this number, and then it would go, and we'd wait, and then we would just look at each other, and we would high five. And then Saturday night, we'd sit down in front of the TV, SNL is on, wait for Weekend Update, and then we'd watch and do jokes, and it would always be like, all right, we got this topic. Yeah, this is our premise. Oh, different joke. Not our joke. All right, we didn't get anything this week. Next week, we're going to get something.
Yeah.
This goes on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, and we never get a joke on it. We finally went, we suck. We're not funny. We're not meant to do this. I quit. And so cut to 20 years later, Mike has now gone on to become a writer and then a showrunner and a show creator. And he created a show with Norm called the Showbiz Show with Norm Macdonald.
Right, yeah.
And so he meets Norm for the first time, and they start working together. And after the first week, he pulls Norm aside and he goes, hey, I didn't know if I was going to mention this, but like, you gave Greg Fitzsimmons a fax number, and we used to fax you jokes when we were first starting out.
Oh.
And we never had any luck. And we don't blame you. Your jokes were so great. We understood why we didn't get on. But just so you know, like I was writing jokes for you, 20 years ago. And he goes, no, you weren't. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I used to take every joke out of that fax machine, and I knew every writer that wrote those jokes. You never once faxed a joke, and we realized, yeah, we had the wrong number.
He did something similar to me when he had his podcast, Norm Macdonald Live. He told me to write jokes and to send them to an email. So I sent it to the email for the first season, nothing hit. And then when I talked to him, because he did stand-up again, he took a year off to write a book. And when he did stand-up again, I was like, hey, I was sending all these jokes. He's like, you should have just texted me. I don't check my emails.
All right, so I got good company.
So, when I saw that tweet, I was like, I think I'm going to bond with Greg.
Oh, that is hilarious.
That's funny.
So how was that like? Because that was probably one of your first writing steps to go back to where you are now. You've written for Ellen and the Man Show. So how was that journey like?
Well, it was kind of, I did stand up for a good, probably 10 or 12 years before I started writing as well. And I had a son. Well, I can tell you, yeah, at least 12 years. And I had a son, and I was on the road all the time. And I was missing being around. And my wife was missing me being around. And so at the time, Louis C.K. was writing on a sketch show for Cedric the Entertainer called Cedric the Entertainer Presents. And I said to Louis, I got to get off the road, man. You got to help me.
Yeah.
And he goes, let me talk to Cedric. So he calls me back and he goes, I got you a meeting with Cedric. Come in on Monday, have jokes for him. They need a monologue writer because the show started with Cedric doing a monologue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I spent the whole weekend writing jokes in his voice, which I didn't really know Cedric that well at that point.
Right.
And so I was writing my best, charismatic St. Louis black man jokes as I could write. And then I went into the office and I pitched him some ideas, and he loved them, started laughing, hired me on the spot. And that was my first writing job. And it just sort of always came through like somebody I knew, like I've never had an agent get me a writing job in my life. It's always been like Norm asking you to do it, Louis getting you a job. Somebody at Ellen liked me and said you should write for the show, and they asked me to come in. I just always, it was always contacts. Wanda Sykes, and so Pete Holmes, Judd Apatow and Pete Holmes.
On
Judd
Crashing.
just asked me Judd was in the parking lot of the Comedy Store, and he goes, "Hey, do you want to write on you probably don't want to write on this sitcom on HBO, do you?" And I was like, yeah, I do actually. And so I started the next week. It's very tough when I see people that have agents that aren't stand-ups, because I just can't imagine how hard that must be to not be out there in people's world where they're seeing you and you're kind of proving yourself without having to force them to read a script,
That's true. I write scripts. I write screenplays though, and I was told when you write a screenplay to pick your favorite actors in mind. It doesn't mean like they'll ever see it, but like it'll help you write the story. So like all the stuff I write is little John Cusack, Nicolas Cage type movies,
Right.
So I don't know why I brought that up. I just thought maybe that was a good writing advice for.
I think it's great advice. I think it is. I think it's really great advice. And I think that if you're a good writer, you can write for anybody. I mean, I've written for a lot of black shows. I've written on gay shows. I've written on Latino shows. And you just adjust. You try to capture that voice in your head and you write in it, and you either can or you can't. But I think a good writer can figure it out.
Now, and then you did the radio, which now is like, I think every radio show is now a podcast, and because like they always upload it to podcast stations.
Right.
So like in a way, you were one of the first people doing a podcast. So like, did you know that was going to be like the major? Because like now podcasts are a bit, bigger than late night in some cases.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. No, when my father was in radio in New York, I grew up the son of a radio announcer. And so it's kind of the family business. And so when I started, Howard Stern, I was on his show and he said, "Hey, would you ever consider hosting your own radio show on my channel?" And I was like, yeah. So I started a couple weeks later, and I did it for like 10 years. And then after doing it for a couple of years, I was like, this is crazy. I'm getting these really good guests that come in. A lot of them because it was associated with Howard Stern, I was able to get them to come on my show. I would get, David Arquette or, Sam Simon and Jimmy Kimmel and all these cool people. And I said, but an hour goes by so fast. So we started my producer said, well, why don't we do a podcast right after the show with the same guest? And so I can't believe people would put up with this, but before there was a million podcasts, people would actually do this. I would be like, will you stay for an extra hour? And they were always like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And now people are like, wait, how long do I have to do this? And so I did that. And so I started doing the podcast, I don't know how many years ago, but it's been a long time.
Now, who would you say is the toughest person you've ever had to interview?
Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Was this before his movie with John Cusack or after?
No, after.
Holy Lord.
Everything revolves around Cusack with you, doesn't
it? But why was Brian Wilson so tough? Like, was he just not friendly or?
Well, he's a little off. He's off. I mean, he's like has a hard time communicating, and they set me up on a junket. So there was like one station, and everybody was taking turns going into the room. It was like a gangbang. He was like, you each get 15 minutes with Brian. And the producer goes, you'll probably only last about 5. Because he only gives yes or no answers, pretty much.
Right.
But I'm such a Beach Boys fanatic that I went in there and I had all these questions I had always wanted to ask him that he hadn't heard before, And I was like, so wait a minute, during the Smile sessions, how come you did all these songs about vegetables? And so he was just suddenly like, what? And so he started like talking to me, and the 2 guys that had gone in ahead of me really did only last like 7 or 8 minutes each. And so there was all this extra time. So I went in and I sat there with him for like 45 minutes. But I mean, I was pounding him. As soon as he would like give me a yes or no question, I just hit him with another one. And I kept trying to ask questions that would draw him out. And it was like, out of respect to him, I wanted to service him well and do a good interview. And I knew that he needed help. And so I tried to provide him with like some of his answers when he didn't have them, and then see if he would like fill out the rest. That was tough, but it was great. It was a thrill.
Now, is it easier for you to do interviews when you're talking to like other comedians or people in the comedy atmosphere who kind of understand your sense of humor, or is it easier to interview like journalists who are just doing press? You know what I mean?
I hate it when it's people that are just doing press, and I get hit up by a lot of publicists that have clients that they want me to bring on, and unless the client has some background in comedy or they seem like they know how to roll with a conversation, I have no interest in like, you ask them a couple questions, then all of a sudden you find them like trying to like steer the conversation to their movie or their book, and it's like, dude, we're going to be on for an hour. Relax. We'll get to your fucking book. And so I find that to be very uncreative and boring. And so I try to just get comedians, comedians are easy. Sometimes actors. I'd rather have like my best 20 guests on twice a year each.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Just get Keckner, Cordry,
John Cusack,
Nicolas Cage.
I'm the same way. I don't like interviewing people twice though, because I like to, like, usually whenever I interview people, I become good friends with them, but like I like to get in their mind, and unless I find that it's a second talk mindset. Like I only interviewed Norm once, and I could have interviewed him 1,000 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
But that's just how I roll. What about you, Alan? Do you have any questions for the great Greg Fitzsimmons?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm somewhat of a Howard Stern fan, and I was reading that you were on that show a lot, and. What was Stern? What is Stern like? I hate to say, with his hair down, which is already down. But is there like a little bit of a different persona when he's not performing? And this is a question that whatever. I mean, it's maybe it's none of our business, but you know what I'm saying. I
mean, that is why it's a tough question, because ultimately, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
Like, he's a very sweet guy. He's a very kind of like, he's like a Long Island Jew. He's like a nebbishy, caring, kind of like generous guy. Like I say Jew in the kindest sense of the word. Like I love the Jewish people. I married one. And there's like, he's got a strong sense of family and loyalty. And I always felt like he was thanking me for coming on more than I was thanking him. He was always very kind.
Oh, nice. So he's kind of like me in a way. I'm always thanking you.
Very romantic.
What's that, Alan?
I said I got the impression he was a very romantic man.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask Beth. He was never romantic with me, but I could see in his eyes that the capacity was there for sure.
Now, Greg, I wanted to ask you about the Man Show because you got on right after they did the switch of the hosts, but it was the same show. What was that like? I think you were on when Rogan and Stanhope
Right.
went from Adam Carolla to Jimmy Kimmel, and then it switched like that. How is that?
Right. It was loaded. It definitely felt loaded because Jimmy and Adam didn't get ownership of the show. It was a show that I think they pitched it to Comedy Central, but Comedy Central didn't allow them to own their own show.
Yeah.
So when they decided to reboot it with new hosts, like Adam and Jimmy were going to get no money for it and no credit for it. And so I felt a little bit mixed about it, even going into that world,
Sure.
But, Joe asked me to do it. And I was like, I love Joe. I love Doug. I think it can be a different show. And I think we're up against it because the people that were fans of the Man Show were fans of Jimmy and Adams.
Right.
And it's almost like you almost do yourself a disservice by calling it the same show. You'd be better off calling it, Swinging Dicks, and just bring on two guys that are going to do a show about guy issues. And people will make comparisons. They'll be like, oh, this is just like the Man Show. But at least you're not calling it the Man Show.
Okay.
Right.
I always thought that was a mistake. I mean, it's the same thing with the Daily Show. Like when it went from Kilborn to Jon Stewart, it became a completely different show. With Kilborn, it was straight up just parody. It was just a parody of what news was. And John turned it into like an op-ed page. He turned it into like a real voice of a person. And then I think when this next guy came along, what's his name?
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah, yeah. I don't know what happened then. I stopped watching it. Is it any good?
I think Trevor was a better stand-up than a host on a, that's nothing against Trevor. I just think I think a lot of stand-ups, they're either made for hosting or they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like how they say stand-ups are bad actors. It's like, that's not true. They're either great actors or they're not.
Right.
And I don't know. I made the mistake explaining that to David Cross because I think he's a great actor, but I think he thought I was saying he was a bad actor. I was like, okay, we'll just talk about Scary Movie 2 now.
Yeah, right. David's a tough interview. I just had him on again last month.
Yeah, I love David, but he was tough. He wasn't the toughest one I had, but he was tough.
Who was the toughest one you had?
I would say Sinbad.
Really?
Yeah, Sinbad was tough because it was for one thing, Alan was sick, so I didn't have my trusty sidekick.
Right.
And
I can see how that could really leave you kind of floating adrift. Yeah.
Just lost.
And the second thing is it was a phone interview, and I'm terrible. Like Zoom interviews are better for me because I have Asperger's, so I could sense energy, but over a phone I can't. So I'm like, oh great. And Sinbad's the nicest guy in the world. He was just a tough guy for me to interview.
That's interesting because I always think of his energy as very, sort of joyous.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but that's just me. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, when you did comedy in the days of probably the boom, where it was like word of mouth, like, oh, Greg is hilarious, you should book him. And now it's more like, how many followers do you have? Do you think that's kind of killed the comedy game a little?
It's for sure changed it. I mean, I know a lot of the comics you see in clubs now are there because they can fill seats.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's true when comedy started, when club comedy kind of took root in, the 90s. I think club clubs had a reputation for being good or bad clubs. So if you went to the Punchline in San Francisco and you hadn't heard of, you know, Rich Scheidner.
We love Rich Scheidner.
But you didn't hear of them. You would go anyway because you knew it was a good club and that they would curate good comedians. And so you showed up. And now I think there's very few people that will go to, there are some clubs that still have a reputation, including the Punchline, where I think people will blindly go, not knowing the headliner. But you go to the bigger chain clubs and it's really like what they call a black box theater. You're selling every seat based on who you are that week. And so they'll bring in people that have big social media followings, YouTube channels, things like that, and they'll bring in their own crowd.
Well, what's your advice for like struggling comics like me, where I'm not a headliner, but I could feature, but I want to get more work? You know, what's your advice for guys like me in that boat where you're already a national headliner, you could go anywhere? Like, how's advice for comics to get in with who don't have a social media following?
Jeez, I mean, I have no idea. I think I'm trying to get headliner gigs. I have no idea how to get feature gigs. How the fuck would I know? I mean, hopefully I'll never have to find out. I mean, I used to know.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago I was looking for feature gigs. I'm sure things have changed. I mean, I would have had you open for me in Oxnard if I knew that you were like a solid feature. I had no idea.
Oh my God. Yeah. I would love to do it. I'll send you a tape, but yeah.
Have you ever featured there?
At Oxnard?
Yeah.
Yeah. I featured with Jeremy Hotz and Norm.
Oh, well, hold on. Let me call my agent right now. I'm going to email my agent right now and see if I can get you in.
Oh, that would be awesome, man.
All right.
You want me to send you a tape so you could watch it first?
No, I'll see. Hopefully you get on the gig and I can see you in person.
Oh, that would be awesome, man. That would be cool. And then my last question for you, Greg Fitzsimmons, because I want to respect your time. Because now you have family, how do you juggle comedy with family? Like, do you take less road work now to watch your kids grow up, or how do you adjust to that?
Well, I'm in chapter 3 of my life. You know, the first chapter is pre-kids. The second chapter is kids. And then the third one is like my daughter's 18, my son's 21. And like I'm doing San Francisco in a few weeks. And my wife just called me. She's like, hey, why don't I come with you? And I was like, great.
Oh,
so now all
awesome.
of a sudden, like, she's going to start coming with me to gigs more. And we don't have to give a fuck about these kids anymore. If they haven't figured it out by now, I can't help them. You know, we were really good parents for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And it would be coddling at this point to do any more. They got to figure it out.
That's true. That's kind of like how I got to figure it out. You know, I got to figure it out with the social media. Alan, you got any last second questions for Greg?
The band was Spirit.
Spirit.
Yes. See, he would know.
Okay.
He would know.
Spirit had a really good guitar player. I can't remember his name.
The lead in Spirit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm having so many brain farts tonight. It's I don't know what to do. I think I'll have a drink. No, but, no, listen, it's so good to have met you, and boy, I can't wait to talk with you in person, and perhaps by then you'll be able to have me have a couple of lines to say for you and open up for you for about 5 minutes.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. He's trying to take my gig. Greg, I wanted to ask you.
Why not?
I wanted to ask you one last thing. Do you think Zoom is the way podcasts and radio shows are going to go, or do you miss like live going face to face, having a beer after or before and talking, you know?
Yeah, I want to do more in person now. I just did one this past week and it felt really good. And the problem is I don't really have the video part set up yet. And so when I've been doing these Zoom interviews for the last year and a half, I just post them on YouTube. And now it's like, it's good. There's like, 5,000 people or whatever will watch it on YouTube. But if I do it in person, I got to figure that out.
Yeah.
So the Zoom is easier for me, but I like the energy of being in the room a lot more. Although this was fun. I enjoyed it very much.
This was fun. Well, thank you so much, Greg, and have a wonderful day. And thank you for doing Razor Riffs, man. It means a lot to us.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay, and I'll let you know if I hear back from my agent about it's this weekend, Friday and Saturday night.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see if they have filled it yet. Okay.
All right. Bye, Greg.
All right. See ya.
And that was the interview with Greg Fitzsimmons. You could follow him. Oh, is he still there? Oh, you could follow him at Fitzdog. Let's get that social media correct.
You got it there, obviously.
Usually I have them plug it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's Fitzdog. It's Greg Fitz Show on Twitter. So Greg Fitz Show on Twitter. And yeah, guys, Alan, that was a blast, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Total blast, and we had a blast the night before. It's always a blast.
It's always a blast. All right, guys, subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.